Welcome, folks. So a lot of polls have come out over the past couple of days, really over the past day or two, in the wake of the debates. They're going in a bunch of different directions. Washington Post ABC poll, which I think was done with Data Progress, although I'm not 100% sure about that. There was a Data Progress poll that Weigel wrote about in the trailer that was vetted by the Washington Post pollsters. That showed after the debate, Joe Biden had lost significantly. Bernie Sanders basically stayed the same, but Kamala Harris had sort of taken a lot of Joe Biden stuff and had just sort of basically got into a statistical tie with Bernie Sanders, with Elizabeth Warren up in there too. Another poll, the Washington Post ABC poll, had Sanders at 23%, gaining 12 points in the 2 months since Biden launched his campaign. The Reuters poll has Sanders at 16%. Morning Consult has Sanders in second place at 19%. And of course, it was announced in Q1, Sanders only raised $18 million, but they had nearly 1 million different donations. So an indication, it's not a one-to-one calculation, but an indication that there's just simply a broader base of support, of deeper support, of deep support deep enough to contribute money. Let's put it that way. However, there is a very strong urge to put the fork into Bernie Sanders. Understandable. He is threatening to a lot of people in the establishment Democratic, in the establishment period. Here is Chris Matthews in panel saying that Bernie Sanders is essentially over. It's a little bit early for this, but I mean, I don't even feel that confident saying that about Pete Buttigieg, although it's pretty clear. But I wouldn't say that.
Moment. It's harder to suss out some of the losers. I think Bernie is a great example of a place where everyone wasn't sure what to make of his performance. I sort of thought he faded into the background. He didn't have a big standout moment. And his polls have sort of faltered a little, but not monumentally.
Didn't you think it was a replica of Bernie being Bernie? Like if there were a hall of the states for losers that lose these elections. No, he's not a loser, but who lose elections, he would be behaving like that automaton. That was Bernie being Bernie, the way that Larry David portrayed.
I was just going to say Larry David, Chris. No, I think with one other candidate in the race, Bernie being Bernie was fine in 2016, or rather it served him well. But on a stage with 9 other candidates and with now 25 people in the race,
You're so smart. That's exactly, whenever somebody says something, I've been thinking better than I do. I thought it's very hard to talk revolution when there's 9 people around you that are not in the revolution. How do you claim there's a revolution going on when you got all these Andrew Yang and everybody else there?
Well, and Bernie's also saying the same thing he said in 2016 this time around. I think that's not working.
That's exactly the point I was going to make, is that America has evolved in the last 4 years. People's perspectives have changed. Bernie Sanders sounds like 2015 Bernie Sanders. And if you've expected some evolution and you haven't gotten it from him, a lot of people scratching their heads.
Has he been stolen his lunch on the left? Because you've got Kamala, much younger, talking pretty hard stuff, pretty strong progressive stuff. You've got Elizabeth, who's been out there for 4 years selling it, and she says it in a somewhat more subtle way. I'm not a socialist, I'm a Democrat. I believe in markets, but I want to refine them, I want structural change. Very carefully calibrating how far left the country's willing to go. Still, Bernie's out there with the old left.
Yeah, I think so, Chris. And I also think that voters know that Bernie Sanders has been talking about these same policies essentially since he's been in public service for the past 25, 30 years. But he actually hasn't done anything to pass announced them, right? He's talked a lot about them, but we have not seen any of these policies signed into law. So you've got Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, new senators on the scene who I think voters are looking at them and saying, you know what, these ladies may actually have a chance to get these policies passed.
With all due respect to the former Clinton campaign official speaking about not getting things done, it is sort of stunning to watch this panel go from everybody stealing Bernie's thunder because they've adopted his policies largely, although that they may deliver it with a slightly different rhetoric, to he hasn't gotten anything done to get these policies enacted.
He's done nothing besides completely recreate the terrain of modern politics. Besides that, totally ineffectual.
Totally ineffectual. Now, of course, he's had some more legislative victories as of late in terms of the War Powers Act and Yemen.
But obviously,
Amazon
you would not want to
$15.
interfere with genocide in Yemen. Should never interrupt a kibbutz like this.
Right. There is, some of what they say, I think is true. That is the case. That it is more difficult for Bernie to stand out on that stage with people who have all basically, he has, I said the other day, I think he's like the dog who caught the car on some level. Many of the people on that stage are basically saying, I agree with Bernie's policies.
Well,
on some, not exactly, but like you say, he has pulled the terrain to the left. And it may be the case that he needs to simply present and show a variant of that. But to proclaim that it's over for him at this point, when all you've basically said is he just has to take it to the next level, I think is a little premature.
Very premature. I also just think the other thing is, look, what has Kamala Harris done to enact policy? If we really want to start nitpicking here about, and we can get into all the other stuff that Bernie actually turns out was extraordinarily effective at amendments and managing the process, even when not only was he in the minority in Congress, he was actually somebody who for decades was the only person talking about inequality and poverty and all the other things that these people are copying him on. But, in addition to that, I was rereading recently about the way the media just embarrassingly hounded Al Gore in 2000. And it's funny because it's like the opposite. I think there's clearly huge ideological, professional, and even like personal finance. At some point, you do start to think like, yeah, these are a bunch of well-fed one percenters whining about the only candidate who might, unlike Joe Biden, impact their lifestyle slightly. Maybe that's why, Chris Matthews is so upset. But, so with the Gore-Bush thing, well, it actually turned out it did have big stakes, but that was all like, oh, this doesn't even matter. The economy's riding. Bush is a moderate. So let's just focus on what a like stiff, inauthentic, bore Al Gore is all day. But what's funny was that everything with Gore, and I'm sure he had his inconsistencies, whatever. But, it was a lot of it was built around he's inauthentic, he's a liar, he's inconsistent, he changes his persona every couple of months. Earth tones, he hired a consult. Chris Matthews, though, you can go back. He's one of these like, you don't always agree, but, George Bush, he's in the cowboy boots, he is who he is.
Yes.
And Al Gore is always, 1 month it's technology. Now he's a friend of the workers. Who is he?
Right.
Now, all of a sudden, we are now, it's an extraordinary feat to say guy is consistent going back to the 60s, right, on all of the major issues of the time, including, by the way, footage of him criticizing Hillary Clinton on inhumanity at the border in 2015. But now let's just turn it into like, it's like he's
not dynamic enough.
He's a filmmaker. It's the same stuff.
Yeah.
Why does Scorsese keep making them same movies about the mafia?
Yes.
It's just as glib and superficial and stupid, except inverted.
Yes.
With Al Gore, it was all, he says this different thing every couple of weeks. Look, Chris Matthews is great when he's talking about how thirsty he is for Melania, but besides that, please.